Hello! We have two relationship stories today from Am I the Jerk and TwoHotTakes. Our first went viral last week and I saw it on the news and several podcasts that I follow, so how could I possibly resist sharing it? As always, your support helps fight the Reddit bot menace. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. We start with story 1. Am I the jerk boarding the plane and leaving without my wife? Sorry ahead of time for the length of this one, but there is a lot of key details I think are important. I know how this sounds, but hear me out. This is also not my usual account, but I don't want to risk my wife seeing this, as it is currently a sensitive subject. My wife, female 43, and I, male 47, have a daughter, female 21, who goes to college out of state. We will call my wife Meg and my daughter Jess. Jess is in her junior year of college. Over the summer, she was employed by her university and was able to stay in the dorms. After summer, she was moving out of the dorms and into her own apartment off campus. Meg and I live in the Pacific Northwest. Jess goes to school on the East Coast. We usually go to visit Jess a couple times throughout the semester, typically Parents' Weekend and Move-Out Day. She also comes home during the holidays. Let me start by saying that traveling with my wife is not a great experience. I'm very type A. I like to have everything organized and make sure that we get where we need to be early, especially when traveling. My wife is the opposite, very go with the flow and we will get there when we get there. I do my best to meet in the middle, but not when traveling by plane. Last year, during Parents' Week, Meg and I were going to fly out to see Jess. Our flight was at 10 a.m. Our airport isn't huge, but not a tiny airport either. I told my wife that we needed to be at the airport 90 minutes early. And we live about 30 minutes from the airport. This being said, I wanted to leave at the very latest by 8, since we would also need to park and walk a little bit. I, of course, got up at 6 to make sure everything was ready and accounted for. My wife does not like to get up early. It took me attempting to wake her up 5 times before she eventually got up at 7:40, then wanted to make coffee, shower, and eat a bowl of cereal. Let's just say that we didn't leave the house until 9. It ended up being busier at the airport than normal, likely due to many colleges having Parents' Weekend, and it took so long to get through security that we missed our flight. Rightly so, the airline refused to refund our ticket. We were able to get new tickets, but not until the next day, and missed Friday afternoon and Saturday morning with our daughter. Jess was disappointed to say the least. Fast forward to now, we're flying down for a long weekend to help her move. We take one flight from our town to a bigger town nearby, then fly from there to my daughter's college town. Again, it was a long morning of me pushing my wife, getting her to move along. Due to the last airport mishap, I wanted to make sure I told her we needed to leave extra early so as not to miss the flight again. We got there on time, with a bit of time to spare, and my wife was annoyed. Kept going on about how now we just have to sit and wait for 45 minutes for them to start boarding. We took our first flight and landed in the connecting city at a much larger airport. We only had about 1 hour layover. We got off the plane at 9:15 and our next plane started boarding at 9:40. We had to take multiple rails to get from where we landed to our terminal. We got to our terminal and had about 15 minutes until our plane was set to board. My wife tells me that she wants to get coffee. There was a little market next to our terminal that sold hot food and coffee. I asked if she wanted me to go grab it for her. No, I want Starbucks, she said. Well, Starbucks was a rail ride away and a little bit of a walk. I told her we couldn't do that, we didn't have enough time. She stated that we had enough time and if I didn't go with her, she would go by herself. I tried to discourage her, but she was determined. She walked away at a brisk pace for her and said she would be back in time. 15 minutes went by and she was nowhere to be seen. They started calling boarding groups. I called my wife hoping she was nearby, she didn't answer. They called a few groups, then called ours. In a panic, I called my wife again, 3 times. Finally, on the last call, she answered and said she was on her way. It was a long line and she had to wait a bit. I told her they were almost done with boarding and she needed to hurry up. I waited by the gate, but the attendant said they would need to shut the gate in 2 minutes. I waited and waited, but she didn't show up. The attendant asked if I wanted to board, otherwise she was closing the gate. I tried to plead with her to wait a couple of minutes, but she insisted that she couldn't, so I boarded the plane. A few minutes later, my wife calls me saying the attendant won't let her on. They had already removed the boarding ramp at that point. She told me I needed to tell them to let me off the plane to be with her, and I said no. It is not fair to do this again to Jess. I said, I told you we didn't have time, but you decided to go anyway. I told her to go purchase a new ticket for the next flight and I would see her when she arrives. She got to Jess's school and seemed unbothered by the whole situation, didn't even really talk about it. I thought maybe she realized it was her fault and just wanted to drop it. Boy, was I wrong. We are now home and she hasn't talked to me since the trip, over a week ago, and is insisting that I am a jerk. So am I the jerk? Update 1. I wanted to answer a couple questions I saw as well as add a bit of extra info. As far as how she acts in other situations, she generally doesn't have any issues. She is never one to be late to work or anything like that. It just seems like travel is her poor area. I never noticed things like this until we started traveling often to see our daughter. This is why I never considered ADD or ADHD. She really shows no other signs of this. I saw posts implying that my wife might have an addiction of some sort. I'm not sure how that would line up, but I don't see that being a possibility. I didn't think the following information was important, but my daughter made a comment, and so did a friend that I discussed this with, so I thought maybe I would mention it here. Jess is not Meg's daughter. I was married once before, and my wife unfortunately passed away due to complications during Jess's birth. I remarried Meg when my daughter was 6. My daughter made a comment that Meg doesn't like or want to come to see or help her, and that is why she is always running late. I have offered to go alone, and Meg was always very against that idea, so I wouldn't think that that is the case. I can't say that Meg and Jess have had the easiest relationship. Meg always wanted to have another child, but we were unable to conceive. She did make comments that she wanted children of her own, and that caused a little rift in our relationship at the time because I wanted her to see Jess as her daughter. But they really never had the typical mother-daughter relationship. It was always very much pushed that Jess was my daughter. Meg did make comments about being excited to have an empty nest, but I assumed that was just because we would have more room. Jess is a great kid and really never says anything bad about anyone, but she had made comments before stating that she thinks Meg is jealous of her, but this never made sense to me. She has also told me that she doesn't want Meg to come to her school for Parents' Weekend as she would rather spend it just with me or wait for Father's Weekend. But Meg always says she wants to go, and I have never gone without her. That being said, I have never seen any negativity directed at Jess from Meg or resentment. Maybe I am missing something. Update 2. I wanted to provide an update. My wife finally started talking to me again. When she did, I told her that I wanted to have a conversation about the situation, but I wanted to give it a couple of days for emotions to settle down. Some of the comments here gave me a great idea, and I wanted to see what she thought about it. For all future trips, I will have my tickets, and she will have hers. I typically drive to the airport and leave my car in one of the pay lots, so I would drive myself and she could Uber. She will have all the freedom she wants to do what she wants, but it is up to her to arrive on time and board the plane. I let her know that it was starting to feel like I needed to keep track of both of us. I phrased it in a way to make it sound like I didn't want to be controlling over her and let her manage her own time. She wasn't happy with this, but she reluctantly agreed. Now, to get to the bigger issue that I didn't realize we had until reading the comments of this post. Call me oblivious, but I really never thought there was any issue between Meg and Jess. After talking to my wife, she wouldn't admit to any issues and stated that she would never intentionally delay a flight so that we couldn't see our daughter, and acted offended that I would ask such a thing. If that was her actual purpose, I don't think I would be able to prove it, but it will be at the forefront of my mind in the future. After talking to Meg and Jess, we decided on the following. Meg and I will be visiting Jess on Parents' Weekend, but I will be attending Father's Weekend from now on, and I will be attending by myself to get some alone time with Jess. Jess seemed very excited, and surprisingly, Meg didn't seem to have an issue with that this time. In the comments, and Dave T quoting, "I didn't think the following information was important," said, "Oh boy." Glass Turtle OG quoting, "Call me oblivious," replied, "Believe me, OP. We are." Ryburn quoting, "I don't see any evidence of this," added, "OP then proceeds to write 3 posts about how she only seems to have trouble being on time when it comes to visiting his daughter. Let's Gets This Party On said, she pushes it's not her kid, angry she couldn't have kids, late to only things involving his kid, won't let him see his kid alone. Dude, really? 12 or so years and you haven't figured out your wife is toxic to your kid and shows her how unwanted she is?" Bluebonnet said, "The fact that she thought she could conceivably get in and out of an airport Starbucks in 15 minutes and it wasn't even located next to their departure gate is legit insane. I can't even get out of the Starbucks by my job in 15 minutes and I always order ahead in the app." Munchies Munch said, "Bruh, I used to get anxiety from my mom leaving me with the shopping cart at the cashier. waiting for her to make it with my heart pounding and my anxiety through the roof. Imagine being at the airport gate, yelling for your wife over and over. That would be horrible. Frack that, she's selfish. Plane tickets are also expensive. How does she feel no remorse? Also, Reddit blaming it on a mental disability once again. Stop blaming stuff on mental illness for people being absolutely trash. This woman is pure selfish, arrogant, and clearly holds no accountability for herself. Oh my gosh, I used to hate when my mom left me to go grab one more thing real quick at the grocery store. It was unbelievably nerve-wracking. All those eyeballs on you. This is so much worse. How can she not know? She's definitely the jerk. Our second story asks if it's ever okay to laugh in your partner's face about something as serious as having children. Well, one man makes a very strong case for it. In story 2. Am I the jerk for lying to my partner about having kids and laughing about it? So I, 34-year-old female, recently became engaged to my partner, 35-year-old male. We met on a dating app 3 years ago and hit it off from the start. 5 years ago, I got my fallopian tubes removed. I've known I don't want to give birth since I was 15 years old and have never changed my mind. I always said that if a child came into my life, I'd love it, but I'm not actively seeking that out. On my dating profile, it explicitly states child-free and infertile verbatim. At the beginning of our relationship, my now fiancé regularly referenced other things I put in my profile. So I had assumed he'd read that part, and kids never really came up in other convos. Uh-oh. Well, last night he mentioned that I should consider stopping my birth control since now we're engaged. And given our ages, we should start trying for kids. I honestly thought he was joking and laughed. He got frustrated and asked me why I thought it was funny. And I reminded him that the second line of my dating profile said I was ostensibly infertile. He was shocked and called me a liar. I happened to remember that I sent a screenshot of my dating profile to a friend for review around that time, and pulled up the old convo with her to show him the date and time and that, indeed, it stated I was child-free. I told him I had my tubes taken out so there was no chance of me getting pregnant without outside help. IVF is technically still an option, but I don't want to put my body through that. He stormed out and his mom called me crying that I've ruined his life. His sister sent me a long message about how getting my tubes removed should be illegal and how I'm a monster for stringing my fiancé along. To be honest, his family never really liked me because they think I'm beneath him. A cousin told me it's because I'm fat. True, but I'm also pretty active. Regular walks with my dog, hiking, biking, swimming, paddleboarding, and a little snowshoeing, none of which my fiancé does with me. I'm also a career woman in a male-dominated field. Plus, we share the household labor 50-50 and I make more money than he does. Because of this, I don't take what they say too seriously, but I'm starting to feel bad. His family believes I stole years of his life and ruined future chances of being a father by lying about my fertility status. He asked for space when he stormed out, so I haven't reached out to him. I do love him, but I'm starting to have serious second thoughts given his family's reactions. I realize now that we should have talked about this before, but am I the jerk for how I handled the situation? Reddit voted, nothing. The post was removed before any verdict. Update 1. So my fiancé came home this morning and I asked him if he wanted to talk. He said there was nothing left to talk about. I asked if he wanted the ring back and he got angry. I've never seen him like this and I tried to speak calmly to him, but he was just yelling about how I was giving up and wouldn't even talk to him. I reminded him that I'd asked if he wanted to talk and he said no, to which he responded that he didn't think I'd go all crazy over a disagreement. This was a huge wake-up call for me. I asked him why he'd never brought up kids beforehand and he said because he knew I would get all weird about it. I tried to get him to clarify, but he just kept saying he couldn't talk to me when I was like this. I swear I never raised my voice and tried to speak calmly the entire time. I told him I can't have kids, nor do I want any. I don't want to give birth. That seems like a deal breaker for him and his family. He said his family had nothing to do with this, and I asked why he told them then. He said because he was hoping they'd talk sense into me. I told him I was ending the relationship and staying with my dad for the time being. This didn't go over well. I'm still kind of shaking. As I was leaving, I asked him how long he's wanted kids, and he admitted he never thought about it, but he knew I didn't want any. But now that we were engaged, it wasn't just about me. He had a say in children. I told him I physically could not get pregnant without IVF, and asked him how he expected that to work. He responded that I didn't know what I was talking about. I left after that because I just didn't have the energy to try and convince him, and I didn't want to further agitate him. When I told my dad everything, he was furious. Apparently, when my fiancé spoke to him about proposing, he did not ask permission. Both my dad and I are opposed to that tradition, just basically letting my dad know his plans. My dad asked him if he was okay never having kids, as I'd had my tubes removed. My dad says he specifically brought up my surgery and the impossibility of natural pregnancy. My fiancé told my dad that it'd always be my decision. I'm thankful this happened before we started any of the wedding planning, but it feels like I swallowed a boulder. I know I need to be more adamant in the future about my stance on kids, and I promise I will have these discussions with future partners openly and from the start. I blocked his family from messaging me after they added me to a group message and started throwing Bible verses at me and saying that I'm a defective woman for not wanting kids. I don't have the energy right now to be petty, so I just blocked them. My dad is going to help me move my stuff over the next couple of days. I need to talk to the landlord and figure out the lease. I'm financially stable enough to pay most of the fees, I think, but I doubt my now ex-fiancé can afford the rent on his own. The only text I've received from him just said, "You'll regret this." I don't believe this is meant as a threat, but I'm being cautious just in case. Thank you all for the feedback. It was helpful to understand where I went wrong. This was my first long-term relationship and I messed up a lot of the communication, but I know it's not just on me. I tend to be the kind of person that doesn't like to rehash things if I feel like we're on the same page. But with huge decisions like this, reiterating is necessary. People are allowed to change their minds, which means rehashing is necessary in a healthy relationship. In the comments, Screechy Pete said, "Man, her ex is such an idiot. I felt myself getting dumber reading his arguments. This man has no clue how a woman's body works." X, "I want kids." OP, "I can have kids." "I can change your mind. I have a say in this." "No, I'm literally unable to have kids." "Yes, you can." "My baby-making parts are no longer in my body. What part of that do you not understand?" "You don't know what you're talking about." Training Constant said, "I would bet money that her boyfriend thought her being child-free was a phase and that he could change her or even force her to have kids. That one line about them now being engaged means he has a say in her life is super telling. OP may not see it now, but she is super lucky she got away from such a manipulative and controlling person, who's also apparently uneducated on top of it all. If he thought his boys were strong enough to reverse her surgery." Jade Echo replied, "The man proposed to a sterilized woman knowing she was sterilized and then acted like she was currently deciding to be sterilized next week and take his choice away from him. Like she bait and switched him. I don't know what's wrong with him, but I'm going to guess it's a lot." At risk of sounding really mean, I'm just going to put it out there. Am I the only one that is surprised that these people are in their 30s? I get that these could be first long-term relationships, but how did they not talk about this? Don't these things come up when you check to make sure there are precautions against pregnancy? You know what I'm saying? Not going to be more explicit here for fear of the bots, but you know. I was going to say jerk because I thought the laughing was mean, but given how this all went down, OP is definitely not the jerk. And that's it for today. Until next time, shine bright, Starlight. If you've enjoyed the story and would like to hear more, consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Thanks, and bye for now.